What I'd like to do in this session is now show you how you can connect Office 365 to your SAP Business One system so that you can effectively send and receive emails using the SBO Mailer component. So the first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to log on to Office 365 as an admin, and you're going to need to create a mailbox for your generic email address that you're going to use. So for example, my company name is SMB Solutions, so I'm going to create an email address called info@smbsolutions.com.au. What I'll do is I'll go in here and I'll choose to add a new user. And then I'll put in the username, and I'll just say the first name is info, the display name is info, and my username is info. Now I have a couple of different domain names connected to my Office 365, so I'll just pick the one that I want to use here, which is smbsolutions.com.au. Now I can go in here and I can put additional details, but because this is for a service account, I don't really need to do that. So I'll say next. Do I want this user to have admin permissions? I'll say no. And then I have to specify my user location, and right now this user is in Australia. And then I'll say next. What licenses do I want to allocate to this particular user? Well, they don't need anything really other than my Exchange Online. And then I'll say next. And then what I'll do is I'll tell the system that all of the results of this user administration session will come through to me to richard@smbsolutions.com.au. So I'll now say create. And that's now done, and you can see I have my username now and a temporary password. So that's it. I'm now ready to go. The next step that I'm going to have to go through is I'm going to have to give this particular email account the ability to send as or send on behalf of my other email accounts in my organization. So before I do that, I'll just click on finish, and then we'll jump into our next step. So now things are going to get a little bit more technical. We're going to start using the Windows PowerShell. So again, I would encourage you to make sure that you are comfortable with doing this before you go down this path. And again, there is actually a document which has been put together by Brad Windecker and his technical team from an SAP Business One partner in the US called Orchestra Team, and I'll provide you with the URL where you can download that document, so you can actually use that document hand in hand with this video recording to walk you step by step through the process. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is you are going to need to open up the Windows PowerShell, and you do that by going into your Start menu, All Programs, then Accessories, and then you'll see you've got an option here, Windows PowerShell, and then you just open Windows PowerShell. Now the first thing you need to do is when you're working in the PowerShell, you need to tell PowerShell what credentials you're going to use for all of your commands. So the process to do that is as follows. Type in $livecred equals, and then you use the get-credential command. Alright, so now what it's asking you for is it's asking you for the credentials of your of a person that has administrator access to your Office 365 account, because that's you're going to need that administrator access to set these parameters, because what we're going to do with the PowerShell is we are going to connect to your Office 365 account, and we're going to use the PowerShell to set some parameters. Okay, so for me, the user richard@smbsolutions.com.au has those rights, and then I put in my password and I press enter, and now it just comes back to the command prompt. And then if you want to double check that that has been put in correctly, then you can just check what the value of that parameter is just by typing $livecred, and you can see right now there's a username set, and the password doesn't get displayed, of course, because it's a secure string. Okay, so we've done that. The next thing we need to do is we need to set the allow redirection parameter so that we can give people or give our SAP Business One access to this system. So how do I do that? Again, I've got to now type in a command, $session, and I'm not going to sit here and read it out. You can see exactly what I'm typing. So effectively what I'm doing is I'm establishing a new PowerShell session, and I'm now passing through the parameters of that PowerShell session. And this is where it helps to make sure that you are typing things in carefully, so you don't make a mistake and have to go through the whole process of retyping it again. So what I'm doing now is I'm telling the system that I want to allow an external machine to connect in to the PowerShell session on my Office 365 with these credentials. I'm now telling it to use the credentials that have been stored in that environment variable, setting the authentication type, and setting the value to allow redirection. So let me just double check that I've typed my parameters in correctly. That all looks okay to me, and of course as soon as I press enter, it's going to tell me whether or not I've done the right thing or if I've made a mistake. Alright, so I've done the right thing, and what it's now doing, it's automatically going through and it's setting that redirection, and it's just telling me where that redirection is going to. Alright, let's now move to our next step. So what I want to do now is I want to import the commands used in the cloud-based service into my client-side session on my local computer. In order to do that, still in PowerShell, I type import -PowerShell session, and then I use my session variable and press enter. And then you're going to see a progress indicator and which you can see, and it's now bringing those commands down. Wait till it returns back. Alright, so we can now see that those commands have been imported in. So now I've got those commands imported in, I now need to use the PowerShell to give our generic email address the send as permission for the user's email addresses. Alright, so what I need to do is, let's say for example, I want to give my info@smbsolutions.com.au the ability or the send as permission for the user named Richard, which is me. So how do I do that? Well, all I do is I type add-recipient permission, and then I need to put the identity. So in this case it's going to be Richard, and then I specify my access rights, and my access rights are send as, and then I want to give those rights, so I'm setting the info user as a trustee for those access rights on the account Richard. So again in here I put info, okay, and then press enter. It's confirming that that's what I want to do. I want to give the recipient send as for the user info on recipient Richard. The default is yes, so I can just press enter, or I can press Y and I'll say yes. And then it shows me that those rights are now given. So the next thing I'll need to do, if I've got 20, 30, however many users, I need to give the info account the send as access rights for each one of those users. So I just go through the same process and I just substitute the individual users' account names instead of Richard. Hopefully that makes sense. Now a quick and easy way to do that is just press arrow up, and then you can go across, it'll bring back that line, and then you just type in the username or each username that that you need to add. Okay, so that's a little quick tip. And of course, if you do it again by accident for Richard, that's fine. You can say yes again or just enter, and all you're doing is you end up giving or trying to give that user those access rights. And you can see here it's actually telling you that that user already has those access rights. So no harm, no foul. Our next step is we now want to disconnect from the PowerShell. So I type in remove -ps session and $session, because that's our session variable. And that's now done. And then I type exit, and that closes us out of our PowerShell. So that's it. That's probably about as detailed as we're going to get with the PowerShell. Now we're going to move on to our next step, which is to configure our SBO mailer. Our next step is to determine what is the SMTP server address that our Office 365 is using. Now, to do that, all you need to do is you go into your Outlook web app, and by the way, you can now see there is that email that was created a little bit earlier giving me the username and password for that account. But I go in here into my email and I go to options. I choose see all options, and you'll see there is an option here that says settings for POP, IMAP and SMTP access. So I click on there, and you can see here is my settings that I'm going to need when I'm configuring the SAP Business One Mailer. Alright, so you'll want to write those down or print them out. In my particular instance, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy them, and then we'll hit close. And now I've just pasted those details here into a Word document so they're easy to get to. And so let's now go, and we're going to connect to our SAP Business One Mailer. So again, in my particular scenario, I am connecting to the demo server farm. In your scenario, you'll connect to either the SBO mailer that's installed in your network, or wherever the SBO mailer happens to be. If it's stored in a hosted environment, then obviously you'll need to make sure that you have access to that SBO mailer to connect to that. Okay, so I'll just quickly go and do that now. So I'm on the server where my SBO mailer is installed, and you'll see down here I have my SAP Business One Service Manager, so I can double click on there. I can go in and I can find my SBO mailer, and I can choose here settings. And now I need to put in the details that I already collected so I can specify what my SMTP server is. So I actually stored mine here in Microsoft Word. So I'm going to copy and paste that information across here. My SMTP port is port 587. I'm then going to tell the mailer that my authentication is basic, and then that opens up this option for me to put in the username and password. So again, this is where I use my generic email account. So in my case, it's info@smbsolutions.com.au, and I will put in the password that I have set for this particular account. The next thing I need to do is I need to make sure that I tell the system to use TLS encryption. And if I'm going to use this for sending scheduled reports, if I want to send out scheduled reports from SAP Business One, then I'm going to need to specify where the client executable is located. So again, I'll browse out. Now in this particular instance, my client is installed on my E drive, and I'm using a 32-bit client, so I need to go to Program Files, SAP Business One, and scroll down here, and there it is. There's my SAP Business One executable, so I'll say OK. And then if I want to put in any email subject prefixes or sender names or anything like that to overwrite what comes through from each individual session, I can put that in here. But in this case, that is it. That's all I need to do. I just say OK. And I want to continue without the Microsoft Fax service. And that's now done. My SBO mailer is ready to start using. I just need to make sure that I've got this flagged so that it does start when the operating system starts. One other thing that you'll want to do as well is just make sure that you have selected the right database. So that's it. You're now ready to go. All you need to do now is make sure that you have the email accounts set up inside your SAP Business One for each of your users, and then you are now able to start using your SAP Business One together with your email and your SBO mailer with Office 365.